So what's at stake here is what goes on inside of us somehow. How do we look at things? How do we frame things? How do we perceive things? What's our perspective? So my point here is I want to be free myself. I want the people I'm in a relationship to know that that same freedom is available to them in full measure. And one of the things that stands in the way is this little piece called forgiveness. And the reason forgiveness is an issue is because you cannot, I cannot be in a relationship with another person without hurting them. You and I will break trust somewhere in every relationship we're in at some level. Some of them are just nuisances. Some of them are annoyances. Some of them are inconveniences. Some of them don't really matter. That's one layer. But there are deeper layers, betrayals, disloyalty really is at the core of this. That's why forgiveness is so central. So the biblical message is twofold for me. One is, it says, and that's the third thing down there, it says that relationship drives the message. Big picture. 2 first chapters in Genesis, last 2 in Revelation, talk about being in a relationship with the Holy the way He designed it. So this was what He intended in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, and in the last 2 chapters of Revelation, this is what will ultimately come to pass as a result of His work on our behalf. But in between there, that entire single narrative that tells one story only, it's a unified literary work, as a friend of mine says. That's just one story, and the story is about bringing back into relationship the broken relationship at the beginning. And it's restored at the end. Okay? So we live in between those 2 bookends, if you will. And I think the challenge is to realize that the gift God gave us primarily to live in this world and do relationships well is this tool, if you will, this resource called forgiveness. Why is it so difficult? Now, this is not show of hands time, please. I want you to sit on your hands even though you might want to confess in public. Okay, you have time to do that in a minute if you want, but, any unforgiveness, any hurts unresolved, any stuff still stuck in your craw, any puzzlement over some kind of violation of you, that's the stuff we're talking about. That's the stuff that robs us of freedom. That's the stuff that prevents us from having access to life. So I think this is a resource, and it is given to us, and then I think it's misunderstood and it's misused. It's a counterintuitive act, by the way. It's not natural. Just like thankfulness is not natural. We're too self-absorbed. We're too self-centered. We're too selfish. So thankfulness doesn't come naturally. Thankfulness is something that you learn, and I think forgiveness is also in that category. But we don't emphasize it very much unless there's some real obvious thing, and then we want to see if we can't get it to work for us somewhere. Well, somewhere in my reading, I came across this slide, and I thought it was worthwhile, so I'm going to put it up here, and you can talk about it amongst yourselves, or it comes up later. The creative violence of love. That it's a little bit like surgery. Surgery is a violating act, but if it's skillfully done, it heals in the long run. And so love designed with forgiveness in it is one of the keys. Listen to Jesus in the passage in Luke where he talks about he who forgives little loves little. He who forgives only 10 or 15. To talk about what is your experience with this thing called forgiveness. This is not confession time. I don't want to hear your stories. Okay? I want to hear what role has it played in your life, or you keep getting stuck, and what I want to hear eventually, because I want feedback from your groups, is there a common thread in your discussion as you just talk about your experience with forgiveness? Any questions about that?
Repeat the question.
What is your experience with forgiveness?
And how is that not going to be our story?
Well, you can tell part of your story if you want, but it's not story time, okay? I mean, if I've been violated by my whatever, and that's predominant in my life, then I know that. The thing I want you to talk about is what role or what's your experience with forgiveness around that event. It's not the event we're talking about, it's the role of forgiveness in that event, in your own fabric of your soul. Make sense? Need more clarification? Ready? This is a conversation. This will be about 15 minutes.
Again. Well,